Picture this. You're getting ready to leave a family cookout. It's getting dark, kids are running around with half-finished popsicles, someone is wrapping up plates in foil. A cousin you barely know from your mama's side jingles some keys and says, "You need a ride?" And without even thinking, somebody's auntie says, "I don't ride with everybody." People laugh, but they also listen. Because in black families, that's not just a cute little phrase. That's a warning that's been passed down like a recipe. A warning that goes all the way back to a time when one wrong ride with the wrong person on the wrong road could get you killed and nobody would ever answer for it. On the surface, it sounds simple. Black folks say they don't ride in everybody's car because some people can't drive. Some folks drink. Some folks keep substances in the glove compartment. Some people are hot with warrants. But underneath all of that, there's a much older truth. Travel has never been neutral for black people in America. Cars, wagons, buses, trains, highways, they've all been policed, weaponized, and turned into traps. The habit of side-eyeing a ride didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was carved into black folks' survival instincts by stories of lynch mobs, sundown towns, and driving while black, long before we ever knew those phrases. Before there were cars, there were slave patrols. Enslaved black people could not just walk down a road and mind their business. White patrols rode on horseback, demanding passes, stopping people at night, punishing anyone who looked out of place. Being caught on the wrong road with the wrong person could mean a whipping, being sold away, or worse. That's where the idea started that movement was dangerous, that your safety depended on who you were with and who controlled the journey. This was the true definition of having survival instincts. Those stories didn't disappear when slavery ended. They shifted onto new technology, wagons, trains, then cars, then buses. By the time we get to the Jim Crow era, the car was supposed to symbolize freedom, the open road, the American dream. But for black people, the car also became a moving target. You had sundown towns where the whole county knew black people were not supposed to be on those roads after dark. You had sheriffs and deputies who used traffic stops as excuses to harass, beat, or arrest black drivers and passengers. You had the Ku Klux Klan watching who rode with whom, who carpooled to NAACP meetings, who picked up workers from the fields. A simple ride could be read as an act of defiance. And sometimes that ride turned into a death sentence. One of the clearest, most terrifying examples of why black folks are so cautious about cars is the Moores Ford lynching in Georgia in 1946. 4 young black people, 2 married couples, were riding in a car just trying to get home. The driver was a white farmer named Loy Harrison, who had just picked up one of the men, Roger Malcolm, from jail after a stabbing incident connected to a white man. In the car with Malcolm were his pregnant wife, Dorothy, and their friends George and May Murray Dorsey. Harrison was driving them back to his farm. That's all. Just a ride home on a dirt road. Somewhere near Moores Ford Bridge in Walton County, the car was forced to stop. A mob of about 15 to 20 armed white men blocked the road, stopped the vehicle, and pulled the black passengers out. The couples were dragged to a tree, tied up, and shot so many times the coroner counted around 60 bullet wounds. Dorothy Malcolm was reportedly 7 months pregnant when she was murdered. Witnesses suggested the mob knew exactly who they were looking for and that this was no random attack. The 4 black passengers had trusted that ride. They got in that car, believing they were going home. Instead, the car became the doorway to their execution. The federal government even got involved. President Harry Truman ordered the FBI to investigate the case, the first time the FBI had been told to investigate a civil rights lynching. They interviewed thousands of people and issued subpoenas, but no one was ever convicted. People in the community stayed quiet. White farmers closed ranks. Black sharecroppers were terrified to talk, worried they'd be killed next. So 4 people were pulled from a car and lynched on a rural road, and the message was loud and clear. You can be murdered on a road in America for who you are and who you're riding with, and the system will look the other way. That's not just a story from some dusty history book. That's the kind of story people whispered about in kitchens and porches and barbershops long after the newspapers moved on. That's the kind of story that turns into a warning. Don't just hop in anybody's car. Don't trust every ride. Don't assume the road is safe. At the same time, cars were also being used as tools of resistance and as targets of terror during the civil rights movement. When black people in Montgomery, Alabama, launched the bus boycott in 1955 after Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, they didn't just stay home. They organized carpools. Cars became rolling freedom vehicles, picking up domestic workers, teachers, and laborers, getting them to work without spending a dime on segregated buses. That carpool system scared segregationists to death. It proved black communities could move without their permission and keep the economy running. So what happened? Those cars and the people connected to them were attacked. The home of Reverend Robert Grates, a white pastor of a black congregation who publicly supported the boycott and drove black riders, was bombed multiple times. Other boycott leaders faced similar terror. Homes bombed, cars vandalized, and activists pulled over and ticketed for traffic violations that were nothing more than retaliation. The message was clear. Movement itself was dangerous. Fast forward a few decades, and the terror doesn't disappear. It just looks different. In June 1998, in Jasper, Texas, a black man named James Byrd Jr. accepted what should have been the simplest thing in the world: a ride home. It was late. He knew one of the men offering the ride, Sean Berry, from around town. 3 white men picked him up in a pickup truck. Instead of taking him home, they drove him down a remote road, beat him, and chained him by his ankles to the back of the truck. Then they dragged him for miles along an asphalt road. Byrd was alive through much of that torture. He died when his body hit a culvert and his head and right arm were severed. His remains were dumped near a black cemetery. His murder became one of the most infamous hate crimes in modern American history and helped lead to federal hate crime legislation. But for black people, it simply confirmed what they already knew. You cannot assume a ride is safe just because someone looks familiar. The vehicle doesn't protect you. The person driving it decides whether you make it home. Layer on top of that the everyday reality of driving while black. For decades, black drivers and passengers have been pulled over, searched, humiliated, beaten, and sometimes killed over broken taillights, lane changes, air fresheners on the mirror, or nothing at all. Even when the laws changed on paper, the culture of policing didn't transform overnight. Black parents give the talk, not just about being stopped by the police when you're behind the wheel, but about being careful whose car you are even sitting in. Because if that car smells like a certain substance, if that driver has a suspended license, if there's a gun in the trunk you didn't know about, you're not just an innocent passenger in the eyes of the system. So when older black relatives say, "I don't ride in everybody's car," they're not only saying they don't like your cousin's heavy foot on the gas, they're saying, "I don't know what you got in this car. I don't know who you've been around. I don't know what kind of attention you attract. And I have lived long enough to know that the passenger pays right along with the driver." That shows up in little ways. The grandmother who insists on driving herself, even when she's tired. The uncle who will pick you up but won't let you ride with his friends. The mom who tells her daughter, "Call me before you get in anybody's car," because she wants to hear the tone of her child's voice and gauge the energy of the situation. Even college-educated black folks with clean records and new cars pass down the same advice: always know your way home. Underneath those warnings is a memory, sometimes spoken, sometimes just felt, that too many black people have been snatched, arrested, beaten, or killed because of what happened in or around a vehicle. A memory of people being pulled off roads and bridges for daring to ride with the wrong person. A memory of bombs under cars and bullets through windshields meant to teach a lesson to the whole community. A memory of someone like James Byrd Jr., whose decision to accept a ride from familiar faces turned into one of the most brutal murders this country has ever seen. So the next time you hear a black elder say, "I'm not getting in everybody's car," understand that you're hearing more than a preference. You're hearing a quiet history lesson. You're hearing Moore's Ford in 1946. You're hearing Jasper, Texas in 1998. You're hearing every whispered story of danger, survival, and intuition that kept people alive long before you were born. Because to black folks, a ride is never just a ride. It can be freedom or a trap, safety or a setup, a way home, or the last mistake you will ever make. Scope News tells the truth. Here are the facts. Special thanks to the historians, journalists, and archivists who have documented the Moores Ford lynching of 1946, confirming that 4 black passengers riding in a car were stopped by a white mob, removed from the vehicle, and lynched in Walton County, Georgia, with no convictions ever handed down. We also rely on verified accounts of the murder of James Byrd Jr. in 1998, which detail how accepting a ride from 3 white men in Jasper, Texas became one of the most brutal hate crimes in modern American history and later influenced federal hate crime legislation. Additional historical context comes from civil rights archives chronicling the bombings, police harassment, and targeted terror against black mobility during the Montgomery bus boycott, including attacks on the home of Reverend Robert Grates and other activists who use carpool systems to resist segregation. Legal disclaimer. This Scope News report is created for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. While care has been taken to reflect historical events, legal cases, and social patterns as accurately as possible based on available records, some details may be simplified or limited by the archives that exist today. This content is not legal, financial, psychological, or professional advice. Viewers are encouraged to conduct their own research and consult primary documents when possible. Discussions involving racism, violence, and historical trauma can be emotionally difficult. Viewer discretion is advised.